So welcome everyone. I'm Latanya LT with the Empowering First Generation College Students Facebook group, which has grown tremendously in large part to you all here for your contributions and seeing the needs met. And I'm hoping to ask you some questions, but we've got Valerie and Dave here as well, who I'm sure have their own questions and reasons for being here. But Laganna, tell us about what you're currently doing first, and then we're going to go back and talk about your very timely dissertation topic and how that intersects with that Facebook group in particular.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so glad that Valerie and Dave has joined us today. I'm Dr. Lawrence, and I am currently a middle school counselor. So I work at a middle school in South Carolina with a population of about 441 kids. Currently, we have about 120 in person, and the remainder are doing virtual online.
And go ahead.
Oh no, that's what I currently do. My background encompasses all types of counseling, rehabilitation, mental health counseling, have a social security background as well, where I was a disability examiner. But my transition into school counseling couldn't have been more timely considering my dissertation topic, which was the experiences of online first generation college students with educational support services. And that mainly is because not only am I first gen, but I have had the opportunities to attend traditional brick and mortar and online schools. And where I found my gap was um, when I noticed that when you're online, even in traditional, you can feel alone when you're a first gen, especially if there are not services on campus. I was fortunate during my traditional college days to have the TRIO program and like Upward Bound and those type of things where they had a mentor for you to help you kind of transition to college. But my online experience was not the same. And so what I did find as a result of doing my dissertation is that there is definitely a gap where educational support services are in regards to our first generation college background being kind of afraid in some sense of not wanting to reach out to professors, not really wanting to reach out to your classmates because of feeling how you're going to be judged or not wanting them to think you don't know something. And then a lot of professors, or, even with advising and counseling that may be offered, it's not marketed enough. So it's not to the point where you feel like, oh, I should take advantage of that, or yeah, I should reach out to a counselor, because it's just still, you're in that phase where you don't want to be judged, and then you don't want people looking at you or making assumptions that you just don't know what you're doing. So, and then you may not feel comfortable even letting them know this is your first time in school, so in college, post um, grammar school. So
Let me ask one more question. I'm going to turn this over to Dave and Valerie and let them pick your brain. But how did you come up with that? Was it just coincidence that remote learning was taking place? Tell us about how you arrived at that. You don't get dissertation topics overnight.
you certainly do not get dissertation topics overnight. You can say that again. So during my journey of my doctoral program, I was told during my coursework that you need to choose a topic that you're highly interested in, you're highly compassionate about. So first gen was at the top. So I always knew that, hey, I know I'm passionate about first generation students. I know that that would be something that I would stick with. Also, like fatherless daughters, because I did grow up with an absent father who stayed in a different state. So I was thinking about doing something like that because I knew that that would keep my brain moving. But nothing I did or research took me away from the first generation
Mm,
topics. So I first went into first generation challenges where I was just going to talk about financial aid, all the restraints, not really having a lot of family background to help you with transitioning. But every time I would go into one of those areas, I would get shut down by my committee. Nope, it's already been highly researched. This is a category that's, you would have to find a gap. You have to find a gap. You have to find a gap. That's all I was hearing. And then it was recommended that I just change my topic altogether, but nothing would allow me to change. I said, I have got to find something. So I was speaking with a colleague of mine, and we were just talking about it. And so she said, well, why don't you stick with a certain population? Because if you stick with a certain population, then you can just research how that particular first generation population, how their experiences are. But then she asked me, had I ever attended any classes online? And I was like, well, my doctoral program is online. And she said, have you ever taken any other online classes? And I said, yeah, I did take some online classes in my master's program. And then she started asking me, well, how did you feel
Oh my gosh.
about your connection? And so the more she was asking me these questions, I said, you know what? I know where I could go with this. And so that's how I ended up with the online sector, because when I started looking to see how many people had researched it already, it was very little. So I said, yeah, this is where I need to go. So I had to really be very specific, because at first it was all over the place. I mean, it was financial aid. It was all kind of different categories. But then I kept hearing, like, you got to be specific. You got to be specific, because you're going to get to a wall and you're not going to know where to go. And so that's how it all aligned with her just asking me those questions. And I'm like, duh, the light bulb went off, like, yeah, this could be good.
I love hearing this story, and I'm so glad we're recording this, because especially those um, prospective graduate students, they need to hear this, like how you arrive at it. But so first of all, let me welcome Joy. Hey, Joy. Joy is at Michigan State, and Dave is at Ferris State. So and also in Michigan. But let me see if you all have any questions. Let's make this a conversation. Any reactions to that?
So we got LT and LG, right? Am I correct on that? I'm gonna have to come up with a nickname for myself next time I'm in here.
You don't even want to know how I arrived at LG. You don't want to know.
All right, we won't ask. I guess the question would be, how do you talked a little bit about the barriers of judgment that students often feel, going to a tutoring center, writing center, office hours. How do you, as a faculty member, how do you help break down some of those barriers of judgment with the students? I mean, I've tried to talk to them about, when I was a student, I used these things, and I've gone from changing them from office hours on my syllabus to, I don't even know what I call it now, something other than office hours. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or suggestions on that.
That's a very good question, Dave. And it's not something that I had really thought about, but considering my position as a school counselor, I probably would approach that on a faculty level as doing activities. So I'm not really targeting anyone specifically, because some people are okay being first gens. Some people are comfortable, they're doing their thing, they're already academically inclined, they are not worried about being judged. So what I would probably recommend is maybe creating a scenario that aligns with how some of them are feeling, but again, you're not targeting a specific student. And so they are seeing the situation and they know it's them. And so I think you may see some transitions in some of the way they respond, or how they may feel a bit more confident or comfortable about asking. And then you can always do what I call the psychological philosophy, where I do surveys, where I ask questions that I already know the answers to. I'll do like a Google Doc or something like that and let them respond anonymously. So then you do get feedback on what the problems are, like how comfortable are you with your classes? How has your transition been with school? What is your rapport with your teachers? Do you feel comfortable enough to ask for help? Those different things. And then you can take those responses and use those to kind of come up with the direction that you would go in. That would be my recommendation.
I love your student-centered approach, and really kind of asking students what they need without targeting them, like you said. And we
Thank
have
you.
Marissa. Marissa just joined us too. Welcome, Marissa. Well, it seemed to me that I remember when you first posted in that Facebook group and you were looking for some participants, and then it seemed like all of a sudden you were done. But we, I know it wasn't like that though. But can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Facebook group and I know some folks from the group actually were part of your study, right? I know you can't it's
Right.
to the degree in which you can share about that. Will you let us know how that went?
Yes. So um, I was paired up with a mentor that was a former graduate of the university that I was attending. And so he was just helping me come up with some criteria and different things on how I could market for participants. And so I can't recall the first method that I was going to use, but his feedback was because social media has become so paramount in society, he was like, are you a part of any first generation college student groups or anything like that? And I said, I'm actually not. And as widespread as social media is, I never thought to really seek out because again, I'm very passionate about this topic and being a first generation college student. So I never thought about, you have these coupon groups and you have these marketplace things where people are selling and you have these other support groups, but I never until that point um, thought about this until he said it. So again, general conversations. So I go online, I'm looking for these, I'm typing this but he told me, he said it cannot be specific towards a certain school or university. So it would need to be a diverse group of first generation college students where I'm not necessarily targeting a specific university or college. And so that's what I did. I went on Facebook, I went on Instagram, I typed in first generation college students. I looked at how many members were there. I looked at the activity because what I didn't want to do is become a part of a group that was dead per se or didn't have a lot of activity going so that I could really observe and see how it was. And so your group was one of the first that I joined in conjunction to like 2 or 3 more that were not university based. And so I first asked for permission. I found out who the administrators were, and then I inboxed to ask for permission to even post my flyer because again, that's protocol. I mean, that's the ethical way to do it. But then I didn't want to get to the point where I'm trying to post something, it uploads, and then somebody comes back and say, hey, who told you you could post in this group? And so that's how I found this group. And I'm going to tell you something. I immediately fell in love with the post. And I was just so overwhelmed, like amazed that the activity was so intense in the group. Like, when I'm thinking about a first generation college student group, I'm thinking, okay, it's probably going to be a lot of people in here talking about their experiences, or they want to ask questions for support wise, how was your experience with this? Or did you ever have this? What is your recommendation from your experience? Those type of things. But I never knew that it would go so big to like workshops and people who are, I wouldn't necessarily say celebrities, but who are integral parts, like very significant, important people, like giving feedback and asking questions. Because I did have a few questions that a few faculty members asked me from the group when I posted my flyer, because they wanted to make sure that I was able to differentiate between online students and not persons that transitioned online as a result of COVID.
Oh,
Because when I did my marketing and interviewing, it was all during COVID. And
yes.
like you said, it does seem as soon as I posted that flyer, graduation came around the corner. Well, I graduated um, about th- four 4 months after I posted that. And I didn't even see myself that far along. I mean, as much as COVID has been not the best thing that could happen, it gave me the time that I needed to focus on my research. And really, honestly, because I had that additional time and the fact that people were transitioning online because they didn't have a choice. So what they may have not been accustomed to, they had to go virtual. It opened the door to a lot of recipients. And so I had a lot of feedback from this group as far as inboxing me to express interest. But then after I sent the criteria and everything, I think from this group, I only had about 4 participants, which I was still very grateful for.
Well, I think that when you shared that you had finished your dissertation, that celebration post, which I love, and you talked a little bit about your background as well, that was one of our all-time most popular posts.
Oh,
It was,
wow.
yeah, it reached over 2,500 people. It did.
Wow.
And it was great to just see everyone supporting you
Absolutely.
and cheering you on. Yeah.
And I didn't even think that I would, I guess because that's not why I posted it. So I wasn't expecting to get, of course, congratulatory messages, but I never expected to get so many inboxes or so many persons that wanted to know more about my story. Or, I got so many responses from that one post that I posted in other groups, because I was in a doctoral mom group, like a supportive group for persons who are mothers who was in doctoral programs. I was in another PhD program group. And so people were like, oh my goodness, like this is an awesome testimony. Thank you for sharing. Like, I really feel inspired now. I really feel, even people at my school, they had like this surprise thing. And so many people's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know you were working on your PhD. Like, when did you find time to do that? And I'm saying to myself, like, I really didn't look at it as that large of a thing per se. It was a mission a goal that I had, I wanted to accomplish. I took the steps to do that. So I didn't expect to get that much, but at the end of the day, I was so happy that I was able to help people, because that's what I am by nature, a helper. So I was like, wow, yeah, any questions you have, I'll be happy to help you. I mean, yeah, so it's amazing. It's a great feeling. It is.
Yeah, it was really inspiring. Let me just see if anyone, I can keep asking questions, but please just jump in, you all, if there's something that you want to take it in a different direction. Um, if not for now, I'll ask. Can you tell us a little bit about your first gen journey? What was it like when you started college? And I knew what I was doing when I asked this question. But
Okay, so um I wow, how do I start? So I always excelled academically in school. Okay. So with that being said, my mom told me, you're going to college. And so it wasn't optional. She just said, you're going to college. And so I had never applied to any schools. I was in this program though when I was in middle school, I think it was. And I was in Project Challenge in elementary school, but this program was, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was connected to the local technical community college. And what they would do is they would take these groups of students who had scored highly on different assessments, and we would go on college tours, just different college tours. And so we would go around and see all these campuses. And so I remember going to Emory University. And ever since I saw Emory, I was like, oh, I want to go to that school. I want to go to that school. Didn't know it was a medical school, never been interested. So, we went to all these schools, we would just go visit. And so after that, it kind of like died down, the tours died down. And so my mom came to me and she just said, I don't know what college you're going to, but you're going to college. And I'm just listening to her like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with staying home, getting a job, I'm okay with that. And so my former elementary school principal reached out to my mom and gave her a printout that had these different colleges on it that he told her that he could help me get into these schools. I later found out years later that it was a list of United Methodist schools, which my principal was United Methodist. So he had the support mechanisms to kind of network. And so she and I looked at this list and I went down this list and she said, Mr. Stuckey told me to just, for you to pick a school and let him know. And so I'm going down the list. I'm recognizing some of the names from the tours that I went on. And so I got to this one school and I said, how do you pronounce that? I said, it looks like Claflin. I said, I've never heard of that before. I think I want to go there because I recognize some of these other schools, but I've never heard of that. So she got with Mr. Stuckey, told him the school that I chose. He got the application for me. I filled out the application, went to Walmart, got some new ribbon for my typewriter,
Typewriter, what's that?
typed up my essay, and she gave him the paperwork. He sent it off. Next thing I know, I'm getting this packet of information in the mail. You have been admitted to Claflin. At the time, it was college. So all I knew is, oh, so I am going to school. They send me this list and tell me the stuff that I need for school. So my mom gets on the phone and she's calling my family and calling my aunts and say, okay, she's going to need sheets. So she was checking off everything on that list that I needed for the dorm. So then it got time for the money part, where Mr. Stuckey had definitely done as much as he could to get contributions, donations, grants, and all that, but I was still lacking some money. So at that point, my mom decided to get the phone, to use the phone bill money. So the phone got cut off. She pawned the TV. She used the money from that. I had gotten a car for graduation. I woke up the day after graduation. My mom said, I don't know what type of car you're going to get, but you're going to get a car today. We went, we got that car, was a straight drive. I got it on purpose because I knew nobody else in my family could drive a straight drive. The only person could drive a straight drive was my cousin Demakis. So my mom got with Demakis. We packed up everything in this hatchback car. I mean, we were, stuck in there. So then we head to Orangeburg with the last bit of money that she had to get me in school. We get lost on the way. There was no GPS. We didn't have cell phones or anything. We get there. I missed a freshman orientation. I missed all of that stuff. I get in the dorm, 3 flights of stairs, get in the dorm. We get up to the my room, my assigned room, and all of these girls are in there. I mean, they're sitting on the beds, they're talking, having a good time, and they're all looking like, oh, this must be your roommate. She's here. So then they get up and walk off. And then the girl that's the roommate, she introduces herself. So by that time, we go downstairs and upstairs, down the stairs and up the stairs, because we're having to move my stuff in. So my mom at the time didn't really want to talk a lot because she was in the process of getting a replacement. She chipped her tooth. It happened originally when I was a baby and wanted her to bite a carrot, but she ended up getting like some type of attachment or whatever. And so it was missing at the time, and she thought it was embarrassing. So she didn't want to really open her mouth to talk. And I kept telling her, like, I don't know these people. You're my mom. So what? Like, I don't know. So then I told her, I don't want to stay here. These girls look bougie. They look like they are just, no, I don't want to be here. I'm not comfortable here. And so she says to me, give it 2 weeks. And if you don't like it, you can come home. And I said, fine, fair enough. So then she gave me $10. That was all the money she had in her pocket, other than the gas money they had to get back home. So she leaves, and then I'm there and I'm like, putting my stuff away, I guess just trying to fill things out. It was very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. I felt so out of place. I felt like I didn't belong there. I ended up meeting a friend that was from my hometown, and I found out that other people were in the area from my hometown that I knew. So I started to feel a little bit better. I had to call someone else to reach my mom because remember the phone was turned off to use for school. So I would have to like call my aunt's house and hope that she was over there. They got lost getting home, her and my cousin. So it was really, I was told I couldn't bring my car my freshman year, but then after I got there, all I needed was a $10 decal, which I ended up getting and bringing my car back. So it was quite, that first semester was really, really a challenge with the adjusting. And then by the second semester, I got a little job at a telemarketing place and started, making a little money. And so that's just what it was. I had people around me, they would be on the phone with their moms and their parents, and they'll be like, oh, I put $100 in your account today, or you need this for shopping, or you need this and that and that. And I still have a letter that my mom sent me. She never wrote in detail, but it would just be the regular lined paper, and she would put something like, "This is all I have for now. I love you." And she would wrap it up like a $10 or $20 bill in in that paper. And so that was my transition. So I didn't have the advantage that some of the other students had, where they had people to kind of support them with money and stuff like that. And still be able to concentrate on their academics. I worked the entire time that I was in college.
That is such an amazing story. I'm so glad you shared it. And I think there are parts of it that some of us can really connect to. I too was a daughter of a single parent, just my mom. My mom had me when she was really young too. And she, drove me to school. I was just thinking of like, what a big deal that was for her to sort of let me go, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so I'm going to put Marissa on the spot. So Marissa is a first gen doctoral student
Oh,
about to embark on her dissertation. What kind of advice? Because that it's one thing to be first gen to go to college. First gen to
mhm.
grad school, in fact, can be further alienating. Like I was socked in the face. I was able to, I struggled. I had culture shock in undergrad. My PhD program, Valerie and I are both at UCLA for our doctoral work, but that was a whole other kind of adjustment. Can you talk a little bit about that as well, or what kind of advice you want to give Marissa?
Marissa.
Girl.
Yes,
First of all,
any advice is welcome. I was actually going to ask if you had any, tips or insight on like how you got through finishing the dissertation, because I am at the stage where I'm pulling my hair out pretty much every night.
well, that is the normal stage. That is not uncommon.
Just right.
Wow. So first of all, congratulations on making it that far. That is an awesome accomplishment. Um, Stay focused, make time, and that's in all caps, make time. Be consistent. And if you are a visual, make sure that you have things that remind you of your why, like what your purpose is. And if you're anything like me, I just can't not finish something that I start, per se, in simpler terms. And I felt like because I was paying for this education in one way or the other, whether I was paying out of pocket or had to pay student loans back, which I do, I just couldn't see allowing them to have that money and to have all the time that I committed in all of the late nights and the time away from my family for an unworthy cause. So, you're doing all of that for an accomplishment. And so you don't want to lose focus of that, because if you do and the time cap is exhausted, then you've wasted time, which I don't think any of us have time to waste. I will tell you, I am a mother of two very, very, very active kids. Every sport you can name, with the exception of soccer and tennis, they do it. Travel, all of it, travel ball. And I'm also married. So yeah, that's why a lot of people were very shocked, because I never talked about my PhD journey online, on social media, any of that. Even at work, a couple of people like admin knew that I was working on it, because I would have certain chapters. I would say, oh, I got to turn in this chapter by this deadline or something, or they'll be like, oh, what do you have going on? But then the baseball moms or the football stuff, they would see me in my car. When we were at practice, I was on my laptop in the car. While they're outside chilling at softball and all this talking, I would tell them at the beginning of the season, especially if it was a new team, I'm very sociable. I'm a social butterfly, but right now I have some goals that I'm working on. And so while I will be present, I will be in my car. And that's where I stayed. Every moment I got, and people didn't understand, y'all are always on the go. I don't see when you have time. I make time. You have to make time, because what happens is I would feel guilty at home sometimes if I'm in my room or in the office on my laptop, and my husband's like, oh, how much longer do you have, and he's trying to say it in a friendly way, but I know he's really asking how much longer are you really going to be doing that work? And so I had to just fill in the gaps. I had to fill in the time wherever I could. If it was a 2-hour practice, I'm already setting that time aside, like, okay, I know I got 2 hours, so what am I trying to do? And then in conjunction with that, I am involved in a lot of organizations, community service organizations. I'm also involved in my sorority. I'm the chairperson of Scholarship and Standards, which I've been for years. My church, I'm very active in my church, and then my kids are involved in stuff at church too. So busy is busy, and I will say that I'm very grateful to have done all of those things while doing this research, because it was a challenge. It was not easy, but you just have to stay. You have to stay the course. Those are my tips. Like you just have to, like, it's not optional. You can think about everything in your life that you thought you couldn't get through, and you got through it, the most challenging times. Focus on that when you're feeling like you want to give up.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So I was afraid in the beginning that Dave was gonna, because Dave was looking so serious. I'm like, oh, when he had that notepad out, I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to answer everything he might have for me. So I was a little scared. And then Valerie, I see she's looking a little apprehensive, like, well, maybe I might ask a question, but let me just see what she has to say. Joy just looks joyful. So.
Yeah, I'm always a little apprehensive asking questions. So,
and that's understandable. But I mean, if you have something you want to ask, no question is off limits, as long as it's ethical and it's not illegal.
No, I really appreciate it. So I was really interested to hear more about your research and your journey. So thank you so much for sharing about your journey. I really appreciate that. I was really interested in hearing more for 2 reasons. And one is that I work at UCLA Recreation, and I am on our assessment committee, and we have a project that's going on to look at how do we better engage students, both undergraduate and graduate, who are not using recreation programming. And we have started looking at data we have about program usage. And we know that a lot of the students who are not regularly engaging with recreation programming are students who are, student parents who are really pressed for time. We also don't have marketing as specific to graduate students. And we know that the graduate student experience is very different. So, and we want to make sure that we're doing outreach to as many different student populations as we can, and effective outreach, especially considering students who may not have time. It's like you might have like 5 minutes. So
Right.
What would be helpful there? So I'm really interested in hearing about that. And also just hearing about your like I said, your key takeaways from your research, because I work with a group in NASPA that's administrators and graduate and professional student services. And it's all people who work in graduate student services. And so just like we're looking at how to engage graduate students in different kinds of programs and sharing research within that group. So those were the 2 different reasons why I was really interested in coming today. So there's not really a question in other than I'm just really interested in hearing more and learning a lot more about your research. So really, thank you.
Oh, well, I appreciate all of that. And that was very beneficial, Valerie. I am, I never thought about, what you all were doing with the recreation. And I think you can kind of use some of the tips that I gave Dave on about the engagement. You're right. Some of them don't have time, and that's just what it is. I mean, that's just reality, a part of life. I mean, if you don't have the time, you just don't have the time. But a part of that time restriction could be the lack of engagement. Maybe they don't really know what the programs entail or how they can benefit them. So the marketing piece is huge, because if you don't have a flyer or something that pops up on social media that says, hey, check out such and such, or some testimonials about how participation helped out with academics, or how, especially with the limitations going on now, I really never really thought in detail, but this research that I've done, Valerie, to tell you the least, has really shed light, and it made me confirm that I did the right thing with this topic, because the participants, I learned so much from the participants, the ones that were actually used in the study and the ones who just wanted to answer my questions. Like, they really just wanted to give me feedback. And what I'm doing right now is, I am, from my research, to answer your question, I never really thought this big, because again, I'm thinking, okay, I did a PhD program, I finally finished, I have my doctorate. Okay, so what? So I'm very goal oriented. So yes, I am working on getting my licensure in counseling right now. But I said all that to say that what I'm planning to do from my research responses from my participants is I'm working with someone right now. I am trying to incorporate a orientation per se, or some type of course for first generation college students transitioning to online studies, whether it be they started in brick and mortar or they're starting for the first line online. I really want to focus on community colleges first, and then move up to maybe universities. But this is something that I'm currently working on with someone right now. So I'm trying to compose like a notebook, like something that's going to be digital, something that is going to, again, Dave, go ahead and answer those questions that they're already thinking, they're already feeling, because I can talk from my experience. I can talk from my whole perception of things, and how I may have felt, just like how I felt when I got dropped off at the dorm. Like, I mean, I don't even know I'm feeling uncomfortable around these people. What's going to happen when I go to class? Like, I don't even know what to expect. On TV is all I see, all these students sitting in these stands. And then there's a professor at the end, where my college was very small. So most of the classrooms were not that big. They were kind of similar to my high school classes. But before I forget to mention this, because I failed to mention this, that one of my desires to become a professional school counselor was a result of the lack of interaction that I received from my school counselor in high school. So I can tell you who my elementary school counselor was, Miss Norris. And I remember how she looks and everything. I cannot tell you who my middle school counselor was, nor can I tell you who my high school counselor was, because there was a lot of people that were clicked out. So you had the group of students who had maybe promises to go to college, or maybe, some of the administrators knew their parents, and so they already had everything lined up for school. I never had a session with my school counselor. Honestly, I didn't even know the availability of services for school counselors at that time. So with all of that being said, I am very, very, very on top of things when it comes to my students, because I don't ever want them to feel that they don't have that person. So, I'm to serve as an advocate. I'm the one to serve as, if you just need to vent, or you need to know that I'm here to help you get out of situations or not get into situations. So I build rapport with all the students. It's two counselors here, my co-counselor and I. They say that she's the more laid back, kind of reserved one, and they tell me that I'm a bully, which I'm not. But I just like to have fun with them, and to let them know that, this is a good thing. You focus on your work, but we can have a little fun too. And then start talking about some real life situations, learning how to communicate, so many things that I didn't learn, so I'm trying to teach them. And the post that I shared in the group with a tidbit of my testimony about what my life has been comprised of, I have that as a big poster in my office. My population is Title I, and 90% of my students can relate to that background. And my principal loves the fact that I have it in my office like that, because when they come in and they see that, I'm sure that that may make them feel a little bit more comfortable, because it's made parents feel more comfortable. Like, yeah, you can see me. Yeah, I'm Dr. Lawrence, but at the end of the day, I have not always been Dr. Lawrence. So when some parents have been kind of like a little apprehensive about sharing their stories, or not really wanting to tell us their struggles or what they really need. They need food. They need, they may not want to say that, but I'm like, I'm looking at them like, listen, I know, been there, done that. All you need to do is let us know, and we can see how we can help you. So it make my background and where I came from as an adult now in this space makes me very comfortable in being able to relate to the struggles that the students are facing.
Well, Dr. Joy Hannibal is going to ask you a question, and then we're going to close after this.
Sounds good.
So I apologize for coming a little bit late. So I missed the introduction. So I was like trying to like take in everything to see what I could ask, but then like all these connections were being made as you were speaking. So so I'm first gen, finished my dissertation this year. And I was previously a school counselor in California.
Wow.
So it was just nice to hear what you have to say. I just wonder, in this work that you are wanting to embark on in terms of helping students transition, because I use my school counseling to help out students. I run a program for Detroit students who come to Michigan State University. But I wonder, how do you think of it differently now that a lot of students have had the virtual experience, and how do you, help them? It's almost like that, transitioning to college, what are the myths? Studying is not going to be the same, but how might you think about the fact that they have had some virtual experiences in coming up with that online kind of orientation?
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. So are you asking as a result of persons having to transition to online learning from what they were accustomed to? How do I feel that what I'm planning on implementing will be beneficial to them? Is that what you're asking? Or
just how you're going to think about it versus, before COVID, there were students who had limited high school K through 12 experiences in virtual classrooms and experience in general.
okay. Well, I hadn't really thought about that in detail. And that's because my research started before COVID. So my target population had always been online learners. It's just that there was an increase of responses as a result of COVID, meaning that there were some that they were in brick and mortar, but then they had no choice but to transition to online. So what you just did, Dr. Joy, is opened up another can of worms, because now I'm thinking that something appropriate to add into that project would be persons who not abruptly, but life changes and say they can't go to classes on campus anymore, and they do have to transition to online. So putting that piece in there, transitioning from being a first gen on campus and then going online, because there's a lot of IT stuff involved. There's a lot of technology stuff involved. And we know as the world evolves, so is technology. So even being comfortable with having the computer at your house and you're not at school in a computer lab, that's deep. I appreciate you sharing. That's deep. I never thought about that.
Listen, friends, this has been an amazing hour, and I appreciate your flexibility with the technology at the beginning. Dr. Lawrence, I just so want to say how much I appreciate you just being yourself and being authentic. You're so inspired, like you're so inspiring without even trying hard to be inspiring. That's like the best way about it, I think. thank you, and thank all of you for being members of that Facebook group. It, you know, it started 5 years ago as a way for 25 people to just stay in contact, because
Wow.
back then that's all it was. We were at a workshop together. Back then there wasn't a lot of conversations about first gen, so we said, well, this is how we'll stay in touch. And it's taken on a life of its own. And so I'm very thankful for it, very appreciative of it. And it really reflects those who are participating in it. So thank you. Thank you for being here. So glad I recorded this. So many people need to hear your story, and also, especially the parts you shared. You said it so early on. You have to find a topic that you're passionate about, because there's going to be times where you're going to cry, and Marissa and I were just talking about this, and wish you had gone to law school because you would have been done and all that kind of stuff. But then it's the impact that you're making for people that may not even know you that well, right? But you've done it. So thank you all again. I will share the video later today in the group, and so feel free to pass it on to anyone you think could benefit from this message as well. Thank you again so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for attending. I hope you have an awesome day and a very happy holiday season.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.